remix. Okay, 3, 2, 1, let's jam. Good evening, primetime partiers. It's primetime party time. Welcome back to our hour of all things media and entertainment, live on the air at 9 p.m. at ptptshow.com and on your time, wherever you stream podcasts. Tonight, we are going to strap on our moon boots, take to the skies in our bebop with our trusty data dog to groove to the real folk blues. If that didn't give it away enough, tonight's episode is all about Cowboy Bebop. We are going to share our favorite moments from this legendary, dare I say it, groundbreaking anime series while also making our own hypotheses on how this anime will translate to Netflix upcoming adaptation to the live action. I like that I just combined all of those words and made up a new curse word.
That's
good
fun. Word.
Yeah. So we will go into our toast and roast before we talk about Netflix. No, before we talk about Cowboy Bebop. But yeah, into the toast and roast. I'll start with one of my toasts that I got the second shot of the vaccine a couple days ago. Feeling a lot better today, but that's definitely a good hurrah for science, hurrah for less anxiety, but also means I got a little bit of brain fog, so might be why, I do things like, say, Netflixery and other things like that. But I'm doing my best to keep my DJ reputation up there. And the other toast I have for this week is that Chibi turned 1. Yeah.
Happy birthday, Chibi, and congratulations to you.
Yes. So a good week of celebrations and that. Yeah, Chibi did get doggy ice cream, which I have to say, I never knew existed until now. I don't know if it existed before now, but I perhaps didn't spoil my dog enough in the past. So yeah, they have things like, there's a brand called Frosty Paws, but then they do other ones. And
they're just basically flavors?
Like, I think they're like a peanut butter-ish.
That makes sense.
And sometimes cheese flavored. They kind of, fun looking at the ingredients, seemed like the Halo top, like the protein packed ice cream. So it seems like healthier.
Okay.
So that's good. Yeah. My roast is definitely that I was also, my toast is also my roast. I was depleted this weekend from my vaccine. So I also was depleted by lots of deadlines in my life. And slowly but surely resurrecting myself from both of those weights. So things are looking up. Things are looking good. And yeah, all around good things this week. I'd say my roasts are not too roasty and my toasts are feeling toasty. So Daniel, what is your toast and roast for this week?
I will start with not a roast, but a mistake I have made on Primetime Party Time that I did want to clear up. Is a couple episodes ago, we had a great episode called The People versus the Suitcase. It's episode 12. During that episode, I mistaken 2 Hollywood Reporter employees. And now that I'm obviously reading their work, I realized that Daniel Feinberg, the critic, and Scott Feinberg, the host of Awards Chatter, are 2 separate people. And as for my toast, well, speaking of things that we're doing on Primetime Party Time, yes. I was honestly a little nostalgic for this place last episode and a little nostalgic for it this episode due to our subject matter. And I wanted to kind of like revisit and document that I am feeling nostalgia for this like restaurant called Les Julien's that used to exist in San Francisco. It is now gone. It was like a little jazz club right outside the Muni downtown. And in our jazz class, we had to kind of go and basically like observe music. And I just kind of like, it was the right time, kind of right place for me. And so I'd start like slipping in, if I was just downtown one night and it was like right there. And yeah, I'm just kind of like remembering, just kind of like the vibe, the smoky atmosphere, the regulars playing the music. and the staff. Shout out to Asusena in particular for those double drinks, and and the owner was Gator. So go Gators, and it was just like an interesting time and kind of place. It was there for me as a 23-year-old living in San Francisco for a couple years. Shut down while I was there, but Yoshi's was across the bay, and Bix is a fine establishment. So that was kind of just somewhat related to kind of our recent episodes, and I'm feeling kind of nostalgic for it. Speaking of, we're kind of toasting with some. Well, what are we drinking tonight? You might find.
Yeah. So we are toasting with a highball. So traditionally, a highball is usually whiskey plus soda. It's a very popular drink in Japan, but also the non-alcoholic mixer, which is always a carbonated beverage when you go there, can kind of be anything. I've gotten it with melon soda if I wanted it. Tonight we're doing ginger ale because it's what we had on tap. So little
well, cheers.
Cheers to us. I know. And yeah, it definitely seems like the kind of drink a space cowboy would have, particularly one from Japan. So that's what we're going with this one. It's a great drink. It's one that it's kind of been forgotten over here, but I think is having a slight kind of resurgence. So yeah, cheers to Cowboy Bebop.
This may go down as one of my favorite series we're ever going to watch on this show. I don't know. Big praise. But
big praise.
It might. What is this show, Tracy?
So, getting into the background on Cowboy Bebop. This show is an anime. The series creator is Hajime Yatate, directed by Shinichiro Watanabe. Music's by Yoko Kano and performed by the Seatbelts. The cast, the main cast members that you will come across is Spike Spiegel, played by Koichi Yamadera / Steve Bloom. Jet Black, played by Unsho Ishizuka / Bo Billingsley. Faye Valentine, played by Megume Hayashibara or Wendy Lee. And Edward, played by Aoi Tada or Melissa Fawn. And we have both of the names out there because the voice actors are different if you watch sub versus dub. And it aired in 1998. There is 26 episodes and one movie, and this is an intentional run. You can watch it as of now on Hulu, but we do think that this show might change platforms as the live action adaptation is to be aired on Netflix. So that's something worth looking at going forward, is where the show lives or if it's able to live on multiple platforms as a few shows are able to do. So I think it's also worth noting that this show is one of the first animes where people were pretty impressed by the dub version, and the dub version became very universally enjoyed because in many cases of animes that came before, people really preferred the sub versus the dub. They did say that the voice actors on both are quite talented.
Yeah, I didn't know this, and kind of, I don't know, just with like the few animes that I've seen in the past, have sort of stopped trusting the dub immediately. So I like went straight into the sub on this show, and it wasn't until I was so many episodes in that I swapped over for an episode and realized that I was attached to the subcast. So I actually watched this entire series in the sub, even though it is well praised as one of the best. And I assume this is where Steve Bloom gets a lot of his recognition.
Yeah.
Did you have like a history with the show before we decided to do it here on Primetime Party Time?
Yeah. So my history of this show, and I didn't remember a ton of the plot before we started rewatching it, but I did recall watching this show as a kid. It does have some mature themes, but I think it definitely fell into the realm of kind of like an action show. So I do remember watching it like on either DVDs, I want to say, and then probably as well on Adult Swim, as we've mentioned in a previous episode where we went into Adult Swim, because this show is also famously known for being one of the first animes to air on Adult Swim and get a lot of traction there
I
from the American
absolutely
audience.
remember falling asleep to Tank. And not much further on the show. I do remember some of the gunfights and whatnot, but I definitely remember Tank playing on the TV as I was kind of dozing off, which is the
Yeah.
main theme of the show.
Yeah. So, yeah, my thoughts on the show. I will go into a lot of the big picture aspects of this show, but I think one of the good things to note right off the bat is this show is kind of a hybrid of a few genres. So, while it is definitely an anime, you're also getting in the Western element because they are kind of these like space cowboy bounty hunter, and then you're also getting the sci-fi because they're in space, going after different planets, different people, different targets. And then you also get a bit of film noir. And that's what you see a lot in the actual animation and the lighting, particularly. And also kind of how they have these mysteries that are being unraveled, like about particularly Faye Valentine and Edward's backgrounds, and they have like these, memory lapses that they're trying to get back, and that gets into more of that detective film noir genre. And it's good also to realize that even though this show aired in 1998, if you watch the animation, it does not feel super dated because of that. You can tell that they took a lot of artistic license on how the show was going to be seen,
Yeah.
and it's similar to watching, film noir films from that era, where although it was shot on not as kind of high tech of a camera as you get now, the quality of the shots are still quite good because it's a lot of intentional filming. And that's what you get with this. You got a lot of intentional lighting and setting. And then you add in the jazz element, which is a trademark of this director. He likes to pair his animes with a specific genre. If you've heard this guy's name before, he also created Samurai Champloo, which has a bit more of a hip hop pairing versus this one being jazz and blues. So, a big part of this show, too, is kind of this meeting of Eastern versus Western values in an anime show. Because most of the shows you'll watch are based in Japan or have some sort of, more of a Tokyo based setting a lot of times. Sometimes you get some countryside or other areas, but I'd say a good majority are, or in like a mystical land where nothing matters. But for this one, you're getting the sense of a bit more of like a global community, and thus as well a lot more of different influences coming in to inform the plot. So the creator has said in an article that was released by INGN.com in 2017 that a lot of his influences were Lupin the Third, which is a anime that is really well known for being a group of thieves that are kind of, they steal stuff, but then they're also kind of like, they're on the wrong side of the law, but every once in a while, like they also have their own version of enemies. And then there's like a detective character where like sometimes they team up with the detective to go against like the actual bad guys, but they themselves are not necessarily the good guys, which is kind of the same feel you get in this show. There's a lot of like, they're not necessarily a troop of Girl Scouts, but they're
Wait.
also they have their own moral compasses that they follow that other people are kind of further off the straight and narrow. And so they kind of, there's a lot of defining right and wrong in this show. But yeah, Lupin the Third is quite a influence. It's also noted as an influence for Indiana Jones. So there's just a lot going on there.
Hmm.
That show has been very influential for a while because it started in the 70s and was still going until recently. But
Oh
if you look
wow.
at the actual crew that's on that show, you can draw a lot of comparisons because it's a similar setup. I mean, if you haven't watched Lupin the Third, I think the closest thing I can think of, even though it's not quite as on point, would be kind of the Scooby and the gang go to space
Wait,
and
what?
get a little bit more bounty and high tech. So
Okay, yeah,
that's the
yeah.
best I can tell you. But for if you are familiar with Lupin the Third, Spike and Lupin are very similar characters. Jet and Jien are also. Faye and Fujiko serve the purpose of being the kind of like strong, and I guess the best comparison for non-anime watchers would be like a Bond girl who kind of uses her appearance but also has even more spy smarts than maybe the others and is kind of able to like manipulate her way in and out of scenarios. And Vicious with his swordsman skills is similar to Goemon. And I got a lot of this from an IMDb trivia board. So if you look it up there, you can find this. And a lot of people on Reddit have also done the dirty work of finding actual quotes and actions that the characters have taken that are the same as some on Lupin the Third. So there's definitely
Really?
supposed to be some comparisons there between the characters and a nice note to that. And if you're not familiar as well, this is a lot of looking at the roots of different shows and stretching comparisons. But Lupin the Third is also related to this movie called The Castle of Cagliostro. And upon watching it, me and friend of the show, Sean, also thought the animation was very similar. But that's also how there's a similarity in certain fight scenes to how Hayao Miyazaki does the animation in Nausicaa. So that was listed on one of the episode descriptions on Wikipedia. So there's a lot of nods to Miyazaki as well to Lupin the Third throughout this series, which I think is correct because this is, I don't know if I want to say this is like highbrow anime because I don't want to put down other animes, but it is definitely in a different genre of it feeling more like film than like animation.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't pick up on a lot of those big picture references, so that's really interesting to know. There are a lot of fun references to different films within the episode contents. Uh,
Yes.
but yeah, it's yeah. I also don't know how to kind of like separate it from other anime, though I do think that that's a warranted distinction. It is very deliberate, and oftentimes I forgot that I was watching animation just in the shot composition and the low key lighting and even like what felt like honest set design,
Yeah.
at times. It's really kind of a weird, wonderful, deliberate show. Um,
Yeah. The creative intention to be in within one season is very like you feel that going through these episodes because it is very paced. It wraps it up. It doesn't rush. It gets to a point that the creator wants to get to, not where the audience who's attached to the characters wants to get to. So that is clear. And it's also why it's good
it is.
because it doesn't go past its prime. And there's a quote from this director saying that he's extremely influenced by Star Trek, but also didn't want to go on and on like Star Trek, even though, you know, you can't make a space expedition show without mentioning some Star Trek, even though
Right.
I'm not a big Trekkie, but I did do my due diligence and research. So, yeah, this is definitely a capsule type show.
Yeah.
And
Not
my
to. Oh,
favorite, oh,
sorry.
sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say not to say that the show is as deliberate as it is. There are 26 episodes, and there were really only I don't want to give a number to it, but like half a dozen episodes were like delegated to the actual main plot of like Spike's past
Yeah.
and basically the themes of him running from his past, not ready to confront death and whatnot. With that, there are a lot of bounties of the week episodes where I feel like a lot of the spirit of the show is in. So it is
Yeah.
fun because it is really deliberate and it's really concise, and it does know where it's going from beginning to end. But there is a lot of time with the characters that's not devoted to kind of Vicious and the Syndicate, which is really fun. Speaking of, what are your favorite episodes throughout this series, whether they're plot related or
Yeah.
not?
I have to say, a big part of the episodes that I liked from this show are the ones that are not, well, I mean, the episodes I talk about do have some plot driving factors, but I
Mm-hmm.
agree. I actually think I enjoy the ones that are less crucial to the plot than the ones that are. And that's
Yeah.
just me. I enjoy the Bounty of the Week. I would watch that for probably 3 to 4 seasons and be really happy with that.
I think that's the show doing its job though, right? Because
Yeah.
they're basically the characters are delaying their inevitable fates by hanging out with their makeshift family on the Bebop. So the
Yeah.
dread of when an episode comes by that advances the plot. Like I know, staring down the barrel of the two-parter at the end of the series, there I was feeling dread because you kind
Yeah.
of know, like, oh no, like we have to confront this, of course. But yeah, all these bounties of the week are perfect. Um,
But yeah, a few bounties, a few sessions, let us say, that are my favorite. The first one that comes to mind is Stray Dog Strut. It's
mm,
also, I really love that all of these episodes have some sort of musical pun or theme to it. It just kind of adds a nice touch, and I love it from a writer's perspective. But this is the one that introduces the data dog. So, as you know, if you've seen even any posters or advertisements for Cowboy Bebop, you have run into the corgi that meets this crew. And the way that the corgi comes into fruition, little lovable Ein, is that the bounty takes Spike and Jet to Mars, where their target is holding this lab animal. Um, the person that they're looking for uses plastic surgery to change their appearance. And then when they find that their valuable lab animal has been stolen, they're trying to get it back. So there's a lot of back and forthing with the Bebop. There's also the lab that's keeping track of them. And eventually they kind of get their smarts together to put a tracking device on the dog so that they can both pinpoint their target as well as get the dog back. And I think what I love is that kind of the dog, the Ain, eventually kind of reluctantly is brought into the ship and isn't necessarily like, yay, we got a dog. They're kind of like, I guess like we gotta keep this one. And but the best part for me is when they put like some like radar on to try to lure in the corgi, but it makes all the dogs from the entire city come out as well. So there's just like this hordes of dogs like running the street. It's just hilarious. It's also all of the episodes introducing the main characters of this show are really solid episodes.
agreed.
They set the scene really well. Another episode I really like is My Funny Valentine. And this does the entire backstory on Faye Valentine. She always discusses having this large amount of debt against her. And you're always wondering, like, how did she get it? Was it from gambling? Was it from this? Because she kind of like parades herself in a certain manner where you think like she kind of like got into trouble by being just kind of a badass. But what actually happened is that she got into an accident and medical science at that time could not heal her. So they cryogenically froze her for 54 years. And then eventually, by like around 2068, or at least that's the year they mark when she wakes up, they had time to heal her then. But even as she's getting healed by this doctor who does not seem very sympathetic to her at all, um, they are adding up what her hospital bills will be for both being frozen and then getting the procedure and then being released. And it's this kind of I mean, their currency there's like called like wargos, I want to say. And it's like this really large amount. It's like 300 million or something. And so I know I could fact check that amount, but it's not that important to this episode. But
It's a
it's
steep
just
debt.
more than she could pay off easily. They told her it will take 54 years of her making steady payments. Ironically, it's the amount of time that she was frozen, which you're kind of like, that she will have to do this. And I think the main quote that I took from this episode that I thought was really compelling is it's not, she says to her comrade that's kind of helping her process what has happened to her. And, she tries to kind of run away and then he catches up with her. And she says, in kind of as like she's exhausted, she's, bewildered by all of this news. And she's like, it's not fair to revive me and make me pay all this money. And I want to say that that is probably still a accurate commentary on our healthcare system today. And many people could relate to that, especially after this year. So I was watching that and going like, wow, one kind of like thing I was drawing from episode to episode is a lot of the themes they choose are, I don't want to say evergreen, but I want to say that they're just like these bigger issues that take so long to solve that they're still relevant now.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's not uncommon for this show to end an episode and just kind of break down the metaphor and tell you exactly what it was about in a quote, elegant like that, and sometimes a little less subtle. And yeah, it's true. It's these things are big issues and they take a long time to solve, and so you can watch this show and you can decide if after 20 years this should we should, it's still if it's a good thing that this is still relevant. I want to shout out because we're talking about Faye. One
Yeah.
of the episodes that or one of the sessions that really stuck with me was number 18, Speak Like a Child, which furthers her backstory. And I'll read this episode description. I got off the Cowboy Bebop wiki because a good wiki cares. A mysterious package comes for Faye with a beta cassette. While Faye runs, thinking it to be from a debt collector, Jet and Spike undertake an arduous search for a player to view it. They find it is a clue to Faye's past. So basically, Faye gets sent this package, which seems like she might have sent it to herself and it got lost in postage for 54 years. That's an interpretation. And one, I obviously love this episode because in 27 or what 2171, whenever this show takes place, whatever date that is, watching Spike and Jet search around for an old late 20th century like player for physical media is hilarious. And also, Faye's story, which is unraveled when they do watch this video they've been trying to find a player for all episode, and they find out that it is a video of Faye. There's this like incredible editing sequence where the video kind of like the kind of the static comes into focus. You kind of see the video, and you're noticing the purple hair. You're noticing that it's going to be Faye, and you see like Spike and Jet and the characters. You get these shots of them figuring like being terrified at like what they're seeing. Like, oh my god, like what is this? This is Faye. And then it just lets the video play out, and it doesn't show you Faye's reaction until the very end of the video. And she still doesn't have her memories. She still doesn't really know what to think about that video. And the entire time, as you're unraveling that it is Faye and you're trying to find the meaning, when it kind of cuts back to Faye at the end of that, and you find yourself as the viewer in the same space, it's such a good moment. Really made that session stand out to me.
Yeah. Her character growth and the unraveling of her mystery/history is probably one of my favorite subplots of this show.
Agreed. Yeah, her backstory was the most compelling for me on this watch. Yeah, it was out of the main cast, and you do spend a lot of time getting the backstories of Jet and Edward and obviously Spike, and both Edward's and Faye's backstories sort of like reach their point in the same episode or in the same session, which is session 24, right before the 2-part finale, Hard Luck Woman, and it is a real payoff for Faye. What other sessions were you into?
Another session I was into was I really liked the Gateway Shuffles episode, mostly because they take on this crew of eco-terrorists, which also reminded me of the Portlandia eco-terrorists. And
Portlandia
so
and
I
Cowboy
got,
Bebop. That's an idea.
yeah, yeah, that crossover is what we're really hoping for on this show. But yeah, it was really hilarious. But it also, this one takes a lot more of a serious tone on that because these are actual people doing, some pretty egregious, violent acts. And which I also think that plays into that same theme of them taking these difficult to solve kind of societal issues like environmentalism and how people should be doing more for it, but how you can also take it to an extreme like this. And they were showing that in this show. And especially since they were influenced by Miyazaki, that does a lot of environmentalist theme in his content, you could see that they were going to put that in here too. Like they do kind of hit a lot of areas of like, what are struggles that are throughout everyone's experience, and they hit them up throughout a lot of these different bounty sessions. Another one is we could not talk about Cowboy Bebop without talking about the Jupiter Jazz Part 1 and 2 episodes. Those are very
These
key.
are seminal to the plot episodes. These unravel Spike's past, as well as give a lot of character to the antagonist, Vicious. What about these sort of like stuck with you?
For these, the ones that stuck with me is this is also where they have the fight sequence from the Cowboy Bebop wiki that they do say for the second one where they're going through all of his memories and the three-way battle takes place, but Gren's memories of the past battles and the fight sequence are apparently stylistically influenced by 1984 film Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, which is also a movie that takes place kind of in a futuristic world where people have trashed the environment so bad that like everyone's in these kind of like metal masks and they kind of fly through these different areas. So you could kind of see how it's like, okay, this is within this realm a lot of kind of seeing that kind of crossroads between technology and not taking care of the environment and how those come together.
Right.
But yeah, as you said, this one is also where you're getting a lot of that plot between Vicious and Spike. And also, then you also have, Faye doing her thing too and running off and kind of causing drama. And then Edward's looking for her. And then it's also where you see Julia coming into the picture as well. It's an important episode, I think, for getting the entire kind of cast of characters involved and how they intertwine with each other. So this is definitely to where you get actual jazz in the episode since Gren is a saxophone player. So you have all of the aspects of this show are kind of coming through and they want to start speeding up the plot here for sure. Because I think a lot of these before, it's like you're getting the introduction to the characters, then you're kind of getting those bounties of the week. And this is hitting about midway through the series, actually, quite exactly so. It's the 12th and 13th sessions. So they kind of know, like, all right, at this point, we kind of got to amp up where the direction we're going to be going to in order to close out the show at a good pace.
Especially because the episode right before this is probably the least serious of the entire series. Toys in the Attic, session number 11, like floored me. I've never seen a series just decide to do Alien out of nowhere.
Wait.
The synopsis for this is a mysterious something is sneaking around the Bebop and biting the crew, leaving nasty purple welts. Eventually, Spike is the only one left and must prepare himself to save the ship. And it's played out like horror, and at the end of it's very implied that everybody dies from this blob, minus Edward, who's able to eat it. And there's a really fun sort of like they always do those next time on Cowboy Bebop previews, and Edward tells the viewers that the show is now called Cowgirl Edward, and they're going in a different direction, and how she's sad to lose her castmates before Jet and Spike kind of bark in and say, no, we have a very important plot two-parter coming up, so definitely stay tuned. This is not the end of the series. But I don't know. I've never seen a series just decide to do that, and just pay homage to a movie and have that much fun right in the middle of a series, and right before the series sort of does take a very serious, very plot-heavy turn. Did you have any others?
Now, I was going to add on to that we will link all the articles I'm talking about in the show notes, but they do actually list Alien as a strong influence for the show as well.
It's tough to do.
That particular episode is very key.
It's tough. What year was Alien? It's very tough to do anything in space after this movie that doesn't in some sort of way. It's very tough to do anything in space after 1979 in the visual medium that is not taking from Alien in some sort of way or another. It was kind of a game changer.
It's a very landmark Alien movie. Almost everyone does at least a spoof, if not a, tribute to. I also really liked, and I wanted to get your read on this, the episode about jamming with Edward, where the crew enlists the help of an elite computer hacker named Radical Edward to help them track down a bounty head who's been vandalizing Earth's surface with hacked laser satellites. The reason I say this is because, to kind of add on to my kind of take from this show, is taking a lot of plagues on society that continue to play out, is hackers. And the influence and kind of how they can be problematic, how they can, cause these really vicious attacks, as well as how they can also do good and help out the Bebop stop the, it's kind of that spy versus spy mentality. I think you get that a lot on this show with the bounty hunters versus bounty hunters. And I'm sure if anyone's watched The Mandalorian, you're kind of also, there's that Star Wars version of the bounty hunters as well, where there's kind of the good ones and the bad ones and the in-betweeners. And they, the Bebop definitely displays kind of the, we're not doing everything on the straight and narrow, but we're also not doing anything against our own kind of family unit's moral compass. But yeah, what's your read on that episode? Or as if it's not one that stuck with you?
It's definitely one that sticks with you. Okay. And I think it's for a couple of reasons. One thing to shout out is with Edward and the hacking aspects of the show in general, it's always fun to see how a 1998 series visualizes a 22nd century internet. And so I always kind of found that funny because you spend a lot of time with Edward in her goggles, kind of like searching. With that said, like, it was interesting to me for a couple of reasons. One, I believe it was one of the first times we had gone to Earth in Cowboy Bebop. And Earth it's not in as great a shape as Mars or Ganymede or any of these other places that people have set up in this world. And two, I feel like Edward, as a late addition, somewhat changes the show. The first several episodes are really dark. We were talking about the low-key lighting, and also a lot of them open up with firing squads on certain characters in these really intense, violent scenes. Edward is not that way. She is so playful, and her episode all I can think of when I think of it is like Edward's theme in that episode, her musical cue, which is just so childish and fun, and in a way, it does, like, I don't know, I can't really say to when Cowboy Bebop does make any shifts, but I feel like it does sort of like spend time in certain, like, exploring certain things in similar proximity to like certain episodes with each other. So, like, we don't really get those dark episodes again, and I'm not going to say like that the Edward introduction marked the shift, but like from a broad standpoint of like just watching this series recently, it was definitely very dark. Then it was somewhat like fun adventures once Edward joins the cast, and it sort of does loosen up a little bit, and it has a little more fun with itself, and it brings in a new perspective. And I don't think that we got a similarly dark episode again until number 20 with the theme park.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I felt that was kind of like the biggest sort of like addition with that episode.
Yeah. I also think once Edward joins, she brings a sense of comedic relief to a lot of the episodes. Like, I remember an episode where Faye is tanning and she's putting on
Oh,
sunscreen,
yes.
and Edward kind of comes up and is like, she's like, "What are you doing with that?" And she's like, "Well, you have to do all these things to keep your skin from looking good, but also it's useless and futile." And Faye kind of goes like, "Do you get it? Like, useless and futile." And Edward just kind of runs around. It's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, skincare,
It's
useless and
so funny.
futile." And it's just one of those moments where like she brings a lot of just kind of airy comedy to this show. Or like there's the episode where they're running out of food and she has like
Oh
a
my
little
God.
like kind of like pebble capsule that she's trying to like hide and eat, and then everyone's like hovering over her like, "What do you have?"
Is that the Mushroom Samba episode?
I think so.
Oh my God. I am so afraid Netflix is not going to adapt that episode. That it
They
is
need to.
so
It's
much fun.
so
It's
Oh yeah,
Edward and
because
Ein
that's
on a bounty hunt by themselves because they've run out of food. And the food that Edward's able to bring back are these psychedelic mushrooms from a mushroom dealer.
yes.
And so
Yeah,
she
because
tests them out on Spike, Faye, and Jet, leaving them pretty much incapacitated for the entire episode. And it's an absolute joy of an episode.
it's hilarious. I also love that Ein eats the mushroom first and
Oh,
then just kind of like
her
hops
hopping
around.
around on all
Just
fours is
like
so funny.
it's so funny. It's exactly the relief you need after you take in a lot of the heavier plot
Agreed.
episodes,
Ein
and then
has
you get
amazing
Mushroom
visual
Samba
gags.
that has no real issue other than they're like, "Oh my gosh, we've run out of food, like, Spike, come on." And then they're all just kind of feuding. And then, yeah,
I
Edward and I are like, "Okay, I guess, like, we'll go get the food. We did find these mushrooms."
I do want to point out, by the way, the going back to the suntanning scene, because I have nowhere else to put this in this episode.
Yeah.
Is that I think that episode was number 10, the Ganymede Elegy, and
Mm.
that has a chase sequence in it that has some really great like first person shots, and a
Oh,
chase sequence
yeah.
that starts during like sometime in the afternoon and ends at dusk, and it is just one of those like beautiful series otherwise. But yeah, it's basically Spike and Jet off to basically deal with someone from Jet's past, while yeah, Faye and Edward have that conversation, and it's just, yeah. But yeah, I would say Mushroom Samba was, if maybe the most comedic episode, and was a blast, an absolute blast. Yeah.
It's one of my favorites. Like, I definitely picked a lot of the more lighthearted episodes as my favorites, except for Faye's backstory. But I do have just like a nice soft spot for a lot of the ones that are more heavier on the comedy side than
Mm-hmm.
they are on the action side. Because in the beginning, you do watch it and go like, "Oh, there's a lot more like gunshots than I realized on this show." And then you get more into it and you're like, "Okay, it's not all firing squads all the
Yeah,
time."
it's
But it
interesting.
does start off that way a little bit.
It's such a versatile show because it does start like the first episode alone is like very poignant, not very comedic, Though Spike is a nonchalant character in the opening, but the actual story of the bounty that they go after is nothing like Mushroom Samba, nothing like any of the other funny episodes. But and then sometimes you'll get an episode in the middle. Like I really liked Heavy Metal Queen #7. That was about this truck driver, and she had this whole game where people would try to guess her name. She went by VT, and she hated bounty hunters, and so like her having to team up with the team to catch this like legendary bounty hunter Decker through like an abandoned mine was just that was like a great strong one-off. You never see VT again. You never need to. And then there's this really dark episodes. The theme park one, for example, #20, was probably the darkest episode that I remember. And then yeah, it gets real serious at the end. After again 24 or session 24, which was the Hard Luck Woman, was the end of Edward's and to a point Faye's story, though she does come back for the finale, and then you get real serious with the Real Folk Blues Part 1 and Part 2 to end out like Spike versus Vicious and whatnot. Yeah, what else did we want to say about Cowboy Bebop?
I wanted to also take some time to think about how is this show going to bridge into a live action show.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the things we know now from reading different articles from Deadline and Inverse and IGN and Sci-Fi is that this series originally is in 26 episodes, and each episode focusing mostly on a bounty, though there are the Jupiter Jazz Part 1 and 2 and the Real Folk Blues Part 1 and 2. But apparently, the live action will do 10 1-hour episodes. So, thus, it will not necessarily be one bounty per episode. And for plot pacing, that's where we get into how will this show be? Are they going to combine? Are they going to dilute? We won't know until it comes out, but I think that's structurally one part beyond it no longer being animated that I think it's good to have some differentiation when you're making a new version of something. So on one hand, it would be if they did everything episode to episode, it might make lovers of the show too easy for them to be like, well, you missed this part.
It's also
there.
Yeah, and that's it seems unnecessary and uninteresting. Like, we've been speaking all night about how this show is very, for lack of a better word, filmic itself. Why would you need a shot for shot? It's already done that.
Yeah. So, and I do wonder if they're going to take a classic film approach to this show or have it be a lot more high-tech sci-fi.
Okay. Do you think it needs it? I felt like a big part of like I don't think, obviously you don't need to do the shot for shot. You don't need to have it exact. You don't need to if we're getting 10 episodes, it's pretty obvious we're not going to introduce Edward in episode 9. And if I'm wrong about that, great. But I don't
we'll
feel yeah. It's that kind of structural stuff that you can play with, and you can play with you can honestly play with the extent of who Spike and Faye and Jet are to some extent, and you should be able to see new versions of these characters with quirks to them that may be exclusive to the Netflix show. But I feel like a lot of Cowboy Bebop is the interesting world that it lives in. A lot of it is that low-key lighting. A lot of it is that like fun shot composition and in the sounds of it and stuff like that. Do you think that it needs that sort of what you were saying, or do you think that it could go in a different sci-fi direction and really like turn either a new tone or whatnot? Like, what do you think it needs?
I'm open to where it ends up. Part of me would like to see it be a little bit on the vintage side, only because I think a big part of why I like this show and why a lot of people do is because it does have this, like, even though it came out in 1998, it almost feels like an older show because it goes into Western and jazz as big parts of the show and how it kind of plays out and the tone of it. But in an interview with the new Netflix creator, Grio, it's Javier Griot Marhoc. Excuse me if I have not pronounced this correctly. But he was talking about how he's been producing the live action. And one of the quotes that he says that I think is quite telling of what we're going to receive is, you've got an entity that is very much a kind of gathering together of influences that were very important in post war Japan: jazz, American pop culture, the whole sort of cowboy thing, reality television. So you're looking at a show that's already a commentary on the influence of American pop culture with Japanese culture in the future in space. And then we're taking that and we're trying to translate that not just in English, but also a format that is not the original format of the show. So I think what he's kind of saying is what we're kind of been mulling around here is, because there's so many layers within the animation, and then they're taking that and adapting that to live action. And you want to think too that they'll make it kind of modern, since, a couple decades have passed.
Yeah, there
That
are some things that they have to.
they yeah, and I'm kind of open to that. I like when new depictions take liberties so that you're not getting it just cut for cut, because I think when you do cut for cut, people just find ways to pick apart at it. When you do
Yeah,
it completely differently, you'll have a split audience of people who like it and people who are like, I can't, I need the original, I won't do it. But you'll also find a lot of people who will discover this one for the first time and then go back and rewatch the anime.
right.
So I think that will very much happen, since this show is it's on the older side for us, but for, say, a Gen Z audience, it's going to be quite old.
Oh yeah.
So that's going to be interesting for how this show gets a resurgence, both in the anime and in the live action. But yeah, I'm okay with if they don't necessarily stick to the entire film noir style.
Of
But if they
course.
did do that, I would appreciate it. So
Right.
there's that.
Yeah, it's yeah, whatever they do, as long as uh, it seems like it, it it seems like it's a worthwhile endeavor. This just has
Yes.
so many influences to it that it feels like, and those influences you can swap out as long as it's inspired. It just feels like a dream project to kind of like jump into, just because of like what it is, and how it does pay attention, and how there are sort of like there's a blueprint for, not exactly like you say, like following along to the T, but there are ways to sort of like come on and be like, well, this aspect of the show is inspired. Like, what do you want to do here? Like there's so much room, if you really love this, to go in and kind of like make a mark with whatever aspect it is. You don't have to start from scratch. It seems like an absolute dream, and it seems like it is
Yes.
begging for a live action adaptation.
I
Um,
think so too, because it doesn't feel completely like a cartoon when you watch it. I did look at this and go, this is great bones for a live action adaptation. Not
also,
every thing I watch, I go, they should make a live action. And sometimes when you hear news, you're like, I don't know how that one will work. But this is one where you watch it and go, like, this will work really well.
does
Even if it's not the same vibe, you're like, all of the, foundation is there.
Also, does Netflix have a flagship sci-fi or space series right now? Like, Prime Video has The Expanse, and Disney Plus has, The Mandalorian as a bounty hunter show, and an army of other Star Wars shows. And to like a
Yeah.
lesser extent, Apple TV has For All Mankind, which, from what I can tell, is more in space than not these days. Like, I don't know. There's a couple
I
properties I could point to HBO if they wanted to pick something up. But if does Netflix have one of these, or do they need like, if they need a flagship space property? I can't think of any right now. Cowboy Bebop is an amazing one to adapt.
Yeah. I can't think of one off the top of my head that they have. So it does seem like, from a content strategy point of view, they would want to have this, since, yeah, all of Marvel has moved to Disney Plus. So they
Oh
need
yeah,
something that, since they don't have Guardians of the Galaxy,
bless you.
though not sure that they did. Yes. But yeah, I think another side note before we wrap up this, and it's quite a silly one at that,
Hmm.
is one of the things I really enjoyed. And This will be interesting because I could totally see it as something that gets cut, but at the same time, I love it. Is the big shot where it's this like little Western news update for bounty hunters, where like these two cowboys come up and like kind of give the update on all things bounty hunter news, and they kind of
Yes.
use it as a ploy to give, the Bebop team kind of like, this is what's happening with in the world with their
Right.
projects. And I always found them to be another bit of comedic relief, but I also could see it as something that's cut because it's not really like required in the show, but it's also one of the aspects that I really liked. I'm like, I like that they have like a little news segment that is completely not serious that interrupts certain parts of the show to be like, big announcement from the big shop, and it plays like this banjo.
Yeah,
It's
I'm so glad you mentioned Big Shot. It's such a fun part of the show. And yeah, I can see it being different, but I hope that they do keep the sleaziness of it.
yeah,
It's fun that it is such a yeah. It is. I also love that it's a popular show. Like bars would just have it on. Um, while the characters were in bars and stuff, even though it is distinctly speaking to, and they say the number of people that its target audience is. You can like there must be a registry of bounty hunters or something because it knows its audience. But yeah, I agree. The Big Shot is a hilarious show within a show. Um,
yes.
yeah,
I felt like it's kind of like the Itchy and Scratchy show for The Simpsons, where you're like, it's not like this is necessary for the show, but it definitely makes it a lot more fun.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Maybe shows within a show is something we should do at some point. Did you have
I
anything else
would
on
love.
Cowboy Bebop?
I, you know, I think we're about at that point where we should just blow this place off.
Here we go.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, let's jam. Stand up pride time, party time.
Was nice. The show couldn't have made without the following amazing people. Our artwork was done by Fen at FenLatte on Instagram. Our theme song was done by Jay Wright at jwrightmusic.com is where you can find him, our website, and thanks to Coco. We are here, ptptshow.com, Monday nights at 9 p.m. We're also wherever else you want to find your podcast feeds. You can hit us up. We got a voicemail on our site. We got info at ptptshow.com. If you want to chat, we have a chat room here that we can check over the week. If you got something you want to say, hit us up. But until then, listen live next Monday night for more prime time party time. We have a little more time to play out here before this comes up. We don't have any slideshows to show you. The Cowboy Bebop's end credits are really great. It's one of those shows where it's like, getting to the end, I'm gonna have to sit through and watch this thing that I've seen 25 times all over.
I don't get tired of it. I don't get tired of the real folk blues.
Much like this. Is this part basically just our like "See You Space Cowboy" card?
Basically. You can have your space, cowboy.
Oh, we didn't talk about Andy and their rivalry. That was fun.
It was really fun.
Oh, well. There's so much to talk about on the show. So much.
There's too much.